So I'd like to first welcome everyone to the virtual town hall with the Honourable Mona Fortier and Irek Kusmierczyk, Member of Parliament. I would ask everyone, if your microphones are not muted, to please put them on mute. And before we begin the meeting, we would like to acknowledge the lands for which we gather. United Way is committed to equity and inclusivity and the respect of all people as we take action to end childhood poverty with the local and broader community. And as part of this commitment, we begin today's meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. Additionally, for those of us who gather in the area of Leamington, we recognize the land of the Caldwell's First Nation. We ask that you all please take a moment to recognize the land where you presently stand. Thank you. Thank you. So we're really excited to be able to host what we consider an important opportunity to come together today to discuss pressing issues in our community. I think we can all agree that COVID-19 has exacerbated many challenges facing families in Canada, and it has forced us to work together in new ways in order that we can support our most vulnerable. You know, we recognize that no single organization can solve the increasingly complex social problems we face, which is why it's crucial that our government has a seat at the table to help us tackle large-scale systems change. The United Way and the Government of Canada have a shared vision of prosperity for the Windsor-Essex community, and we're committed to working together to lift people out of poverty and position them for success. We want the Windsor-Essex community to know that we're advocating on their behalf and that we recognize the importance of elevating resident voices in these important conversations. But before we begin, we'd like to capture a photo of everyone in the town hall today because we obviously want to promote it. So I'd ask you if you could please turn your cameras on and pause briefly. Someone from our United Way team will take our photo. And then after that, we will introduce our guests. So I'm hopeful that we now have the photo taken, so I will proceed. So it does give me great pleasure to introduce the Honourable Mona Fortier, Minister of Middle Class Prosperity and our Associate Minister of Finance. First elected in 2017, the Honourable Mona Fortier is the first female Member of Parliament for Ottawa-Vanier. She hails from a riding with a strong diversity, representing in itself the social fabric of Canada. Her expertise covers the areas of healthcare, education, job creation, and Francophone affairs. Prior to being elected, Mona Fortier worked as Chief Director of Communications and Market Development at Collage Lassie and managed her own strategic communications consulting firm. She has also served on several nonprofit boards of directors. She has received numerous awards for her community involvement, including the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012. In her role as Minister of Middle Class Prosperity and Associate Minister of Finance, Minister Fortier is serving her community and all Canadians by ensuring that all government policies take into consideration the realities faced by middle class Canadians, as well as the solutions needed to address them. Also joining us this morning is our Member of Parliament for Windsor-Essex and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Ministry of Employment, Workforce Development, Disability and Inclusion, Mr. Irek Kusmierczyk. MP Kusmierczyk was first elected in 2019, shortly after Prime Minister Trudeau appointed Irek as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability and Inclusion. His family has lived in Windsor for more than 35 years after immigrating to Canada from Poland. Irek's parents instilled in him a passion for community service, leading him to a career on Windsor City Council, where he was elected 3 consecutive times. MP Kusmierczyk previously worked as a director of partnerships for We Tech Alliance. He earned his PhD from Vanderbilt University with a specialization in local government and cross-border environmental relations around the Great Lakes Basin, and also holds a master's degree from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Many of us have known Irek for a long time as a strong advocate for our community. We'd like to welcome you both. MP Kusmierczyk, would you like to begin with opening remarks?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lorraine, for the really kind words and the wonderful introduction. You know, it almost feels like yesterday that we met together under different circumstances, probably close to just a little over a year ago at the United Way, and to host pre-budget consultations with Minister Fortier. And that was a really important roundtable discussion. We got a chance to hear from so many different stakeholders about the issues and the challenges that we're facing here, also the opportunities that we have in front of us. And so I really wanted to commend United Way. You guys always seem to have a knack of bringing our community together, bringing the right people together for these really important conversations. And so I just wanted to say right off the hop, thank you so much for everything that you do in your leadership position in our community to have these important conversations and to advance these important issues that are critical to our community. Of course, the United Way took on a leadership role, a trusted leadership role in distributing the $1.34 million that came to the community from the federal government through the Emergency Community Support Fund. And over 36 organizations and programs benefited from that. But it is because you are so incredibly well connected. It is because you have such incredibly strong partnerships in the community that we were able to deliver those programs in the community. So I just wanted to say thank you for your incredible leadership. Minister Fortier, this is now, I think, the 4th or 5th time that you've come here to Windsor-Essex. I think you like the weather. I think you like the company. And I think you like the food here as well too, and just everything about us. And so we're delighted to host you here once again. We have an incredible advocate in you, and again, the pre-budget consultations that we hosted in Windsor a year ago were the first pre-budget consultations in Canada on your tour. And I think that's no surprise, because I've always maintained that how Windsor-Essex goes, so goes our country. Many of the challenges that we're facing in our community, many of the opportunities are very much challenges and opportunities that are shared across the country. And we very much are a bellwether for the rest of Canada. So I'm not going to take too much time, but I did want to also acknowledge Minister Fortier during the peak of COVID for many months led daily caucus calls with members of Parliament. And so every single day we would speak with our stakeholders during the day, and every evening Minister Fortier would ask every MP, tell us what you're hearing, tell us what you're seeing. And those comments and that information was then translated into policy programs like the CERB, like the wage subsidy, like the Emergency Community Support Fund. And so all I have to say is Minister Fortier is an incredible advocate, is always listening to folks on the ground, and we're just very, very lucky to have a champion in Minister Fortier. With that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mona, and looking forward to this wonderful conversation today.
Thank you, Irek, and thank you for your leadership also. I'll talk about it later again, but honestly, I think we're a great team, and you and your community being part of that team to fight COVID is truly remarkable. Now, I want to say good morning, everyone. Bon matin, tout le monde. I do want to start to say I want to acknowledge that I am joining you today from the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. And I want to thank Chief Executive Officer Lorraine Goddard and her entire team at Windsor-Essex United Way Centraide for organizing this virtual town hall, but also for your leadership and everything you have done to support vulnerable Canadians in Southwest Ontario through this pandemic. And particularly, I want to congratulate you on your achievements with your programs such as On Track to Success, which supports vulnerable youth to graduate and attend a post-secondary, as well as Prosperous Cradle to Career strategy to lift children out of poverty in Windsor and Essex County, programs that are really making a difference in the community. Now, we know that fighting COVID-19 is a team effort, as I mentioned, and I really want to thank my colleague, Irek, for joining me today and for all of your work advocating for your constituents and also ensuring that voices of your community are heard here in Ottawa. Nous sommes ici ce matin pour discuter de l'engagement de notre gouvernement à soutenir la population de Windsor-Essex pendant cette pandémie et de notre plan pour reconstruire en mieux, tel qu'il a été souligné dans le discours du trône à la fin septembre. We are here to discuss our government's commitment to support nonprofits, charities, and the people of Windsor-Essex through this pandemic and our plan to build back better as outlined in the speech from the throne at the end of September. We all know that the social, economic, and health impacts of this pandemic have been unprecedented. There is no person, including myself, who hasn't been impacted in some way. I have seen how this has affected my family, my children, and even myself as we have adjusted to help flag the curve. All Canadians' quality of life have been impacted, from their health to their livelihoods. And at the same time, we know the pandemic has disproportionately affected vulnerable Canadians. Now, we are committed to supporting organizations, businesses, and Canadians here in Windsor and across the country through this pandemic. We have been working with all levels of government and with partners on the ground like the United Way Centraide from day one to protect Canadians. And that is exactly what we're going to keep doing during this unfortunate second wave. We ensured that close to 9 million Canadians could continue to pay their bills with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and supported over 3.8 million employees with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. For seniors faced with increasing costs, we introduced measures like a one-time tax-free payment to those eligible for the Old Age Security Program and the Guaranteed Income Supplement. We also created the Emergent Community Support Fund, like Irek mentioned earlier, to provide funding to organizations that help Canadians most in need. Now, United Way Centraide Canada, in partnership with its local chapters like yours, is one of the 3 intermediaries administrating round 2 of this fund. The latest installment of this $350 million investment will support charities and nonprofit organizations serving vulnerable populations who are disproportionately impacted by this pandemic. We also established a one-time payment to persons with disabilities to further help them during this crisis, and continued to help families with another special one-time top-up to the Canada Child Benefit in May. The well-being of all Canadians is a key measure of our success. Now, as we build back better, our government will continue to make substantial investments in areas like housing to make sure that everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home. We will continue to work with our partners, including directly with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation partners, to address food insecurity and strengthen local food supply chains so everyone can put nutritious food on their table. And we are continuing to support people experiencing homelessness during the COVID-19 pandemic by providing a total of $394.5 million to the Reaching Home initiative. The funding can be used by recipients for a range of needs, such as purchasing beds and physical barriers for social distancing and securing accommodation to reduce overcrowding in shelters. We also provided significant new support to women's shelters and sexual assault centers, including facilities in Indigenous communities, to help manage and prevent a COVID-19 outbreak in their facilities. Overall, more than 1,000 organizations across Canada have received support to protect some of Canada's most vulnerable. These supports are helping Canadians pay their bills, put a roof over their head, and keep food on the table. Dans le discours, nous avons présenté notre plan pour lutter contre la COVID-19 et rebâtir en mieux. Les 4 piliers de notre plan consistent à lutter contre la pandémie et sauver des vies, faire tout ce qu'il faut pour aider les Canadiens à traverser cette crise, rebâtir en mieux et défendre qui nous sommes en tant que Canadiens. In the speech from the throne in September, we presented our plan to overcome COVID-19 and build back better. The 4 foundations of our plan: to fight the pandemic and save lives, to do whatever it takes to support Canadians through this crisis, to build back better, and to stand up for who we are as Canadians. Nonprofit organizations are doing critical work to support Canadians here in Windsor and across Canada, and they are counting on their government to support them. This is why last month, our government proposed a new Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy. This new program would be effective as of September 27th, 2020, and would provide access to rent and mortgage support until June 2021 for organizations that have lost revenue in this crisis. Earlier this week, my colleague, the Honourable Mélanie Joly, the Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages, announced an investment of $6.3 million in Windsor-Essex businesses to spur growth in the manufacturing sector and create 80 jobs. Our commitment to create 1 million jobs, to make the largest investment in Canadian history into training for workers, and to make significant long-term investment into Canada-wide childcare and early learning will make a difference in the lives of Canadians in the middle class and those working hard to join it. All of these measures will help our country overcome COVID-19 and will create jobs and opportunities for workers and families so we can come back stronger and be more resilient. La priorité absolue de notre gouvernement demeure d'aider les Canadiens pendant la pandémie. Je le sais que c'est difficile, mais il est essentiel que nous continuions tous à prendre la COVID-19 au sérieux. Our government's top priority remains helping Canadians through the pandemic. I know it is difficult, but it is essential that we all continue to take COVID-19 seriously. And the best way to keep the economy strong is to keep Canadians healthy. Now, we are getting them the help they need today while finding solutions which will improve their quality of life over the months and years to come. In the long term, as we look to recovery, we are determined to build back better. We will focus on targeted investments to strengthen the middle class, create jobs, and generate clean growth. We will take bold action on health, the economy, equality, and the environment to build a more resilient country for future generations. Irek, myself, and our entire government will continue to do whatever it takes to support the people of Windsor-Essex and across the country. Merci beaucoup, and I thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you, Minister Fortier. We will now move into the kind of Q&A portion of the town hall. And I would again remind everyone to please keep their microphones on mute unless you've been called upon to speak. As we were planning this town hall, we did ask registrants to submit questions in advance. And I would like to thank you for those who did so. We wanted to ensure that in this town hall, with having a limited amount of time, that we're able to cover a variety of topics within this short period of time. So we did select a number of questions that would help guide our discussion. But please feel free during this time to submit questions using the chat feature. If we have time at the end of this period, we will address as many questions as we can. But please know that any questions that are in the chat box that we've not been able to respond to this morning will be shared with Minister Fortier and MP Kusmierczyk's teams after the town hall, and they'll follow up directly. So let's get started. I'm going to read the first question. It was submitted jointly by Prosper Us, Community Action Network of residents in Leamington. And their question is focused on childcare. They weren't able to join us at this time, so I will proceed reading their question. Childcare is an issue that has received a lot of attention since the beginning of the pandemic. We know that access to childcare is essential for working families, and that is related to many other factors that keep families from falling out of the middle class. This is an issue for women in particular, whose employment has been disproportionately impacted by the lack of access to childcare during COVID-19. When childcare was discussed in the throne speech, could you please describe what specifically the federal government has committed to? Would this include universal childcare or a tax benefit or additional subsidies? And can you also please let us know whether an equity lens will be applied to which communities or groups get access to more help with childcare? So those who are equity-seeking population groups, will they be given access to meet their needs? So I will have Irek or Minister Fortier, please feel free to respond.
Irek, you want me to start and you can maybe pursue after?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Perfect. Well, first, it's a very, very important question. And we know that for many Canadian families, access to high quality, affordable childcare is not a convenience, it's a necessity. And that is why, as you mentioned in your question in the speech from the throne, the government is committed to creating a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system to give Canadian families access to high quality, affordable childcare. Now we have to go back to 2015. Our government has been working hard on this issue, and we've created nearly 40,000 affordable childcare spaces across the country, of course, in collaboration with provinces and territories. And starting in 2017, our government committed to spending $7.5 billion on childcare to support and create more high quality, affordable childcare across the country. And this includes $1.2 billion over 3 years to provinces and territories through bilateral agreements for early learning and childcare programs. So this year alone, we have invested more than $1 billion to help provinces and territories continue to create affordable quality childcare for Canadians. Now we're working with each jurisdiction to invest an additional $400 million in 2021. And that was announced in July, an additional $625 million to address the reduced availability of childcare and the unique needs of the childcare sector stemming from the pandemic across Canada. Now, on October 30th, my colleague, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, Ahmed Hussein, launched a call for proposals for innovative projects that aim to improve the quality of early learning and childcare across Canada. And Canadian non-for-profit organizations, charities, and Indigenous organizations are encouraged to submit their proposal by December 3rd. And it's important to listen and to explore new ideas and solutions in early learning and childcare to meet the diverse and emerging needs of Canadian children and their families. So this is where we're at this time. I don't know if Irek, you wanted to add on the childcare and early learning question.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. The only sort of comment that I wanted to share is yesterday morning we hosted a jobs and skills and training roundtable with EI commissioners and other stakeholders. And it was interesting that one of the first things that came up on that topic was childcare and how critical that was to skills training and jobs and employment. And later on that day, we held a roundtable with the Prime Minister and local labor leaders and local workers. And again, the first comment was childcare and the need for childcare. And so, Minister, as you pointed out, childcare, access to childcare absolutely is foundational to this recovery. It's going to be foundational moving forward. And we all know that this economy, or excuse me, this COVID crisis and this downturn, it's referred to as a she session for a reason, because it has impacted women in particular. And so having childcare is something that is foundational to our recovery, and it's going to be foundational to our economy moving forward. And locally, I just wanted to add as well, the Canada Child Benefit has been absolutely critical in our community. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, and Manveer can correct me on this one, but I believe it was $90 million was transferred to Windsor-Essex through the Canada Child Benefit. About 20,000 children benefited from that. And so we know that it's a cornerstone. Childcare and healthy children is an absolute cornerstone to our economy.
And maybe one more thing I forgot to mention, Lorraine, that equity lens that was asked in the question. I want you maybe to all know that since I'd say more than 3 years now, every time we do an analysis, we do a GBA plus analysis, a gender-based analysis on investments that we're doing. So this lens help us to see how we're addressing that question. I just wanted to answer also that question inside the other one.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for your responses. Our next question is from Rose Hayes. Rose, I would ask you to unmute your microphone. She's a member of the Prosper Us Community Action Network of residents in downtown Windsor. And her question is focused on helping families move into the middle class.
Thank you, Lorraine, for your introduction. And good morning, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity for meeting with you today. There's growing evidence which suggests that real estate investments by people who don't live locally is having a negative impact on the local economy, making the cost of accommodation unaffordable for many single-income households. Hardworking single parents like myself, who only aspire to become part of the middle class, are struggling to take that step up because of financial barriers. When 60% of my income goes towards rent, it's quite likely that I will be working for the rest of my life with little chance of homeownership or retirement. So my questions are, how do you plan to remove barriers for families trying to reach the middle class? And what can be done to create opportunities for families to create savings and build wealth? Thank you.
Irek, do you want to start with this one?
Oh, go ahead, Minister, if you want to start.
Well, this is a very important question, and thank you for sharing your story and the fact that you are working very hard, and we want to support you into this. As you know, our government, since we got elected in 2015, has brought forward the National Housing Strategy. We've also increased the Canada Child Benefit twice now because we want to make sure we send some support for families to pay, of course, bills, but also to be able to move forward. Now, for the National Housing Strategy, we are working on different programs for first-time buyers, and maybe working with Irek closely in your community. You could see if you could be eligible to have access to that program. We are listening, and we're trying to provide many other supports with affordable housing, making sure that we're increasing the number of units across the country, also making sure that they are available. I know that there is a lot of work still to do, but I would tell you that many streams have been developed to provide affordable housing, supportive housing, new one-time support for new buyers, and we will continue to find new ways to support middle-class Canadians, but also all Canadians to have access to an affordable and safe home to live in.
Yeah, excellent, Minister. Thank you for that. I would just add, one of the surest way to get more people, more Canadians into the middle class is to create jobs. And locally, we've been following very closely the recent announcements of the major investments of the big three, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, about $5 billion worth of announcements in our manufacturing industry. Our federal government stepped up with $295 million investment in the Ford operations, and we are at the table locally with the negotiations that are currently taking place with FCA. And so creating jobs is something that is absolutely critical in our in order for more people to enter more Canadians to enter the middle class. I think skills training, we mentioned that, is something that is absolutely critical to make sure that Canadians have the skills to be able to get a good job and start on a good career path. And if you, in the throne speech, the Prime Minister and the government made a commitment to make the largest historic investment in skills training for Canadians, because we know that upskilling and reskilling is going to be something that's absolutely critical. And it really does align with the On Track to Success program that United Way is carrying out, as well as the Prosper Us program as well too. And a third sort of component is to make sure that post-secondary education is more affordable. It's something that is absolutely critical, which is why our government put forward the Canada Emergency Student Benefit. It's why we doubled Canada student grants. It's why we put a moratorium on repayments of student loans. And it's also about what we did is created more Canada Summer Jobs, for example, to get more opportunities for young people to get that first work placement experience to be able to get on a good career path. So we actually increased the number of Canada Summer Jobs from 35,000 of the previous government to 85,000 Canada Summer Jobs. So I think those, in addition to what the minister had mentioned about affordable housing, childcare, pharmacare as well too, is going to be critical in that as well. Those are all pieces and components that are going to help more Canadians enter the middle class, stay in the middle class, and have a higher quality of life. It really is going to take a whole of government approach to this issue.
Thank you, Minister and MP Kusmierczyk, for your response. Moving on to the next question is from a former United Way colleague of mine, Andrew Lockie, who is the CEO of the YMCA of Southwestern Ontario. And his question will focus on stabilizing charities during COVID-19. Andrew, please unmute your microphone.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. It's great to see you. And yes, of course, United Way is near and dear. As a longtime employee and a huge believer in United Way, as I am a longtime employee and huge believer in the YMCA and the not-for-profit sector. I really appreciate MP Kusmierczyk and Minister Fortier for joining us today. It's my delight to have the opportunity to share with you some messages that perhaps you've heard before, but I'd like to reinforce, and perhaps there's some new things in there as well. But on behalf of the YMCA of Southwestern Ontario, I would first like to thank MP Kusmierczyk and for his ongoing commitment to his constituencies and to Windsor-Tecumseh community. Thank you all as well, certainly, to MP Kusmierczyk and Minister Fortier for their time, as I've said already, and the opportunity to engage in what we think is a really important dialogue. First, also wanted to say that federal programs created during the pandemic, some of which Minister Fortier and MP Kusmierczyk mentioned, including the Emergency Community Support Fund, and in our case, certainly critically important support has been the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, have enabled us to continue to provide vital programs, many vital programs and services in our community who need to cope, connect, and recover from COVID-19. We want to thank the government for their commitment to extend the wage subsidy into 2021, June 2021. At this point, critically important for the overall health of the association and our ability to continue to manage programs, not all of which we've been able to continue, as you probably are aware. Certainly, this pandemic has had a remarkably large effect on organizations like the YMCA, and my YMCA is no exception. It has limited our ability to deliver the level of programming, not the quality, but the scale of programming that we're familiar with providing. And these supports certainly have been immensely helpful in helping us to continue to provide what we have been able to continue to provide. But ongoing diminishing funding sources, high costs associated with continuing operations in this climate, massive reductions in revenue, while helped with the wage subsidy, do not cover the significant fixed costs which we carry as well. And so my question is, as Lorraine mentioned, with regards to how Minister Fortier can provide insight on what organizations like the YMCA will hear around the parameters specific to the wage subsidy in 2021. As you know, it has been announced to extend to June 2021, but the parameters surrounding it are unknown and are important for us in making planning decisions on how we move forward, and also whether the Government of Canada will provide additional financial support to help charities stabilize and continue to provide critical services in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you also for really presenting, I think, where we're all at. Since the beginning of this crisis, the government has stepped up working with stakeholders across the country to see how we can bridge through this first and now through this second wave. And we know that the wage subsidy is a tool, the rent subsidy is a tool. The CERB was a really important tool for many Canadians who couldn't work or needed to make sure that they put food on the table and pay their bills. So the Canada Emergency Response Benefit was needed at the time. And now that it has been transition to EI, and we've added caregiving benefits to it, because we know we're still in this second wave. And as nobody here believe has a crystal ball to know what's going to happen next. We can't speculate on what will be needed next June, but we can, though, right now, make sure that we have those programs, those relief programs to bridge us to the next phase. And our government is looking at all of the possibilities in the next wave to make sure that we address this pandemic, depending where we're going to be at next year. So that is why we are now still providing broad-based programs to support charities, nonprofit organizations, even businesses, supporting workers and families. And we are going to look at what will be needed for recovery. As you know, through the speech from the throne, we have committed to create 1 million jobs. We are committing in training Canadians to make sure they have access to those jobs. And we will also look at what else we need to provide supports into recovery. We all are very looking forward to see when that vaccine will be landing in Canada. And, I think we're all working together very hard to plank this curve of the second wave. And those programs that we have currently are going to be extended till June 2021. And we will look at what happens between January and June to make sure that those programs support what we need at that time. So I'm hopeful that my answer is really providing some relief. I know that you need to plan, and we're going to try as much as we can to give you as much information we can, also following public health officials' guidelines and where we're supposed to go. So we have to keep working together. And I know that locally with Irek, you have championed to make sure that we understand what's happening in your neck of the woods during this time.
Yeah, excellent, Mona, and all excellent points. And Andrew, I would just add that we know that not-for-profits and charities, we know they employ about 2.4 million Canadians across Canada. 70% of those employees are women. And so, if we're talking about boosting and getting us out of this she session, I think focusing on the charitable sector is something that's absolutely critical. We also know how hard hit charities and not-for-profits were. I mean, YMCA lost about 77% of its revenue. YMCA's across Canada, 77% of its revenues in April, alone in the month of April. And I think over the last 6 months, their operating revenue, they lost about $54 million that they're in the hole. And YMCA employs 24,000 people across Canada. And the reason I know that is what I can tell you, Andrew, is that there's a group of Liberal members of Parliament that have formed sort of like a sub-caucus pushing for supports for charities, for the YMCA specifically. And it's something that we're committed to doing. MP Mark Saray is actually leading that charge. I would encourage you to reach out to Mark Saray on that particular topic. But we are very much in tune and alive to the challenges that charities are facing and that YMCAs are facing across the country, and very much advocating on your behalf for that.
That's great to hear, Minister Fortier and MP Kusmierczyk. I would add to that conversation that charities and not-for-profits are part of our social safety net, and to see the loss of that important part of that safety net, I think would be detrimental to our community for sure. Moving on to the.
I may add, just because because Irek mentioned it, Mark Serre, yes, is working for nonprofit, but I'd also say that there's another caucus that we have, a sub-caucus on social finance and social innovation enterprise. And I know that is a very strong suit from charities and nonprofit organizations developing these enterprises that bring jobs, that bring different ways of giving service in the community. And I believe that will also be part of the recovery as an excellent tool for charities and nonprofit organizations. So he mentioned Marc Serre. I will mention Ryan Turnbull, the MP from Whitby, is the lead on this, I believe also with Lloyd Longfield. So as you can see, our government is really looking at different ways of supporting nonprofit organizations and charities into making sure that we can continue to have, through social enterprise or finance, some financial support.
Thank you very much. So we still have a couple of minutes before we have closing remarks, so we'll continue on with another question. And this question focuses on supporting young people, which is a theme we've heard from many in our community over the last number of months. And the question is, prior to the pandemic, neighborhoods in Windsor and Essex face significant structural challenges related to child poverty. Although the government has done much for children, youth, and families through programs like the Canada Child Benefit, we see so much more being needed as young people are being disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, particularly as it relates to their education and mental health. Looking ahead to 2021, can you please let us know how you're planning to provide additional supports to communities and families to ensure their young children and our young people are not left behind?
Well, Lorraine, I think you did mention what we've been doing now, and we will continue to do and increase the amount for the Canada Child Benefit, which has been important direct investment into families and has brought many of them out of poverty. We still have work to do though. And we are looking at providing, of course, as the speech from the throne mentioned, to create 1 million jobs and to help workers be skilled or reskilled to be able to access those jobs. That means giving job security for families. And then we'll have to look together and working with Irek, of course, on what kind of programs or investments are needed to continue to support to reduce poverty. We have a strategy to reduce poverty, but we also know that we have to adapt it now that this pandemic has shared maybe some of the gaps that we really have now. And I won't analyze all of those gaps right now, but we do realize there are some. So we'll have to be working together as you are the experts on the ground and you understand your communities. This is where we'll be able to work with Irek, of course, who will listen and bring back those ways of how we can reduce those gaps. And again, I think we have a really good foundation of different programs. The National Housing Strategy is one where if we can make sure that Canadians have access to affordable and safe housing, it'll give that motivation to go out also and be available to work. So all of this working together is going to be key, I believe.
Yeah, and what I would just add to that is, yesterday we held a roundtable for youth with my colleague, Member of Parliament, Adam Van Couverden, who's also the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Youth, Diversity and Inclusion. And so we discussed some of the challenges that our young people are facing. And what I can tell you is our government has put forward $8 billion of supports for young people during this pandemic, whether it's, again, the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, whether it's making sure that they have job experiences, 85,000 Canada Summer Jobs placements, We poured in an additional $255 million into sort of workplace integrated learning opportunities. And at the same time, we're also, again, what I mentioned before is making sure that post-secondary education is more affordable. So increasing student loans, doubling student grants, making sure we had a 6-month moratorium on payments. We're very much in tune to how devastating the impacts of COVID have been on our young people. And we know how the impacts potentially will have long-lasting effects. And so this absolutely is a priority for this government, which is why, again, we put $8 billion towards that. But it really is a whole of government approach, once again, where you have to look at affordable housing, access to healthcare. All of those things taken together are going to help our young people compete and thrive. So, and of course, working together with United Way through its programs are going to help, the 1 out of 3 residents that we have in Windsor-Essex, the children that are in poverty. Programs like Prosper Us, programs like On Track to Success. We keep going back to that because they are they're going to be cornerstones, and they are cornerstones of what we're doing here in our community. So your work, Lorraine, is absolutely critical.
And I'm going to chime in again here because I know you're going to want to close this, but before we do, there is one topic that is on everybody's mind, I am sure. It is mental health. Mm-hmm. And honestly, when we talk about families, vulnerable people, anything, even me, mental health has been something I believe is the new pandemic that we're dealing with. And yes, we have to fight COVID altogether, but we also have to find the fact that mental health is a residual of this pandemic and it won't leave. We will have to deal with it. We are investing money to make sure that we provide virtual care and mental health tools to support Canadians. We're investing in providing some support, but that'll be, I believe, key to all of the programs that we bring forward. If we can take care of mental health, we'll have better ways of getting out of this. So I know that many of you have probably asked that question in the chat. I saw mental health a lot. It's just so important that we work together on seeing what else we need to do to support the mental health of families, seniors, youth through this pandemic and after.
Thank you, Minister Fortier, for speaking about mental health, because certainly none of us are immune to it. And the experiences of dealing with COVID-19 and the stress that I think we can all say that we've experienced as a result of it. I would agree. I think that is the new pandemic, and we do need to really look at how we're going to support people during this time, and even as we move out of COVID-19. So, and it affects everyone of all ages and socioeconomic backgrounds. So thank you for addressing that. We are at that point in time on our agenda where we are going to turn it over to Minister Fortier and MP Kusmierczyk for closing remarks. We do have a number of questions in the chat box, and as we had indicated at the start of this town hall, that we will make sure that those questions get sent over to both MP Kusmierczyk and Minister Fortier for a response, and we promise to do that. But at this point, I would like to hand it back over to Minister Fortier and MP Kusmierczyk for final comments.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde et merci pour votre travail exemplaire et exceptionnel. Thank you so much for your hard work on the ground. I see all of your faces and I know that you've been working very hard to provide the supports for your constituents, the members of your families, and it's really remarkable. And as a federal government, we are also working with you and will continue to work with you. I have to say we've been working also diligently with the provinces, with municipalities, because we understand that we all have to work together to fight this pandemic. And I think that if we really focus on the priority of health and safety first all together, then we'll be able to be resilient and build back better and make sure that we go through the next phase of recovery. And again, I want to thank my colleague Irek for being here this morning and being able to work together to provide those programs and supports that the federal government has been bringing forward and adapting as we've been moving forward, because we know that last March is not what is today in November, and we will continue to make sure that we look at those gaps that we have and to address them in programs and initiatives. So thank you so much for being here this morning, having this conversation. And it's not the last one, because I love Windsor-Essex region. I will be back, hopefully physically, but for now, I'm doing this virtually. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you again, Minister. You know, folks, we're incredibly lucky to have Minister Fortier as the Associate Finance Minister and as the Minister for Middle Class Prosperity. We have the Minister on speed dial. We have the Minister's team on speed dial. We're in constant communication. They're absolutely phenomenal. And we're very fortunate, Minister, to have you as an incredible champion for our community. And we know that that feeling is genuine and it's authentic. Like I said, you always, whenever we see each other in the hallways, you're always asking me what's happening in Windsor, what's happening in Windsor-Essex, how's the community? And of course, you've been here, I think, 4 times now. So we really are very fortunate, Minister, to have someone like you as a champion, as an advocate in Ottawa. And I'm very proud to call you my colleague as well, and to have you in our corner. Lorraine, again, the tremendous work of United Way. You guys are absolute champions in our community, tremendous leadership. And we're going to be with you every step of the way because you are such an important role in our community, and such an incredibly innovative organization as well, too, I have to add, with a lot of the programming that you're putting out there. One last point, I just wanted to take the opportunity of my final remarks to respond to an important question that Brent Manuel had put in the chat room, which is, what will the federal government do about jobs for people with disabilities? This is an absolutely a critical question, and I just wanted to address it really quickly here. I know we're running out of time, but I think it's really important because we know that COVID has hit Canadians with disabilities particularly hard, and we know even before COVID, we know that the percentage of the participation of Canadians with disabilities in the labor market is far too low. What I can tell you is that every year, the federal government transfers about $955 million through something called workforce development agreements to the province. You don't really hear about it because the federal government sends this money to the provinces and then they use it for skills training. A third of that is dedicated towards helping Canadians with disabilities enter the workforce. About a third of that, about $330 million every year, is about helping reskill and train Canadians with disabilities. During COVID, we also established what's called an Opportunities Fund, which is a $40 million fund to help create more accessible workplaces and, again, provide training and skills for Canadians with disabilities. Over COVID, we also were transferring $1.5 billion through the Workforce Development Agreement as well. That's a top-up. And again, a third of that is ring-fenced to help Canadians with disabilities enter and remain in the workforce. So it's a critical question, and it's one that we're absolutely alive to, and it's one that we are committed to addressing and putting significant investments behind because we know it's important. It's important for us to get more Canadians with disabilities into the workforce and contributing in our community. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you very much to everyone for being on this call. I learned a ton, and looking forward to keeping this conversation going.
Well, thank you very much, Irek, for responding to that question because, you know, absolutely there are we're all impacted by COVID-19, but there are certain population groups who really have been significantly more impacted. So thank you for taking the time to respond to that question. We do express our sincere thanks to all of you who joined us today at the town hall. And thank you to Minister Fortier and her team for virtually visiting us here today, and to our Member of Parliament, Irek Kusmierczyk, for his support and local representation. We know that tackling the challenges created by COVID-19 will take a sustained effort and collaboration across all sectors. We believe that conversations like these will help us to move through the recovery phase, and we look ahead to a post-COVID future. We have a lot of work to do, and we appreciate the efforts of everyone who's attended here today. I just, again, thank you to everyone. Please stay safe, please stay well. Don't forget to wear your mask and keep yourself physically distanced. Thank you, everyone.